Greetings, everybody. Michael Garfield here for Future Fossils Podcast. The next few episodes are an experiment. I was out in Portugal for the Boom Festival back in August and managed to record a couple of really weird, fun, different conversations with people I encountered at the event. Something I'm going to continue doing this January and February when I'm down in Australia for Rainbow Serpent and Earth Frequency Festivals, and later in April when I'm out in California for the MAPS Psychedelic Science Conference. So expect Future Fossils to have a lot of these special edition episodes where it's just me and random people, and our wonderful co-host Evan Snyder will be joining us on the more routine episodes. Anyway, this one's a total hoot, featuring the ever-amusing Shaft Uddin, whom I met walking to my tent at Boom Festival and then immediately launched into a 9-hour conversation with this guy. About 2 hours in, we decided that we should be recording it, and then I accidentally bumped the button on the recorder and missed the first hour and a half of what we thought this episode would be. So we begin with a bit of frustration as we discover that the entire conversation we just had has disappeared into the ethers. But given this show's emphasis on legacy and mystery, it seems only fair that so many of our attempts to archive these wonderful conversations are thwarted by circumstance. So kick back, enjoy an especially long episode as our public conversation ended up weaving in some of the additional boomers, and we ended up having a 5-person chat, which was very beautiful and spontaneous. Before we get started, just a reminder to please subscribe to us, rate us, review us on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever it is that you're listening to these. Definitely check us out on Facebook. We have the Future Fossils Podcast discussion group and post a tremendous amount of interesting news and discussions there. Also, I'm writing a book called How to Live in the Future that should appeal to any fans of this podcast. It's a mashup of evolutionary biology and psychedelic futurism, and that is available in its serial form to people following me on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Michael Garfield, and I'll be publishing not only the writing for that book, but also auxiliary visual art and music and talks and other recordings associated with this memeplex that we're putting together. At any rate, I loved this conversation with Shaft Uddin, and I hope that you do too. Kick back and enjoy this very special Boom Festival edition of Future Fossils Podcast.
Luckily, this is fun.
There we go. Well, we just had probably the entire podcast and we didn't record it, but
let's do it again.
That's okay.
It's okay.
Right now, I'm
Life isn't a rehearsal. This is just happening right now.
Yeah, there we go. This is Future Fossils Podcast on the Road, Boom Festival Special Edition number 1. Michael Garfield, your host, here with Shaft Uddin, who is a sacred sexual healer.
I don't like the word
tantric
healer.
Unicorn.
We're all our personal healers. I'm an awakener.
Okay.
Activate that shit yourself, yeah?
Okay, so you're just facilitating.
Exactly.
And
we are our own healers.
And so far we've had a possibly unrecorded incredible conversation about experiencing time and intelligence through the body going in as a way of expanding, and we were just talking about the counter programming and turning into the swerve, that like when you're starts to hydroplane, and if you try to turn back onto the road, you'll flip the car, but if you turn into the direction of the swerve, you regain your stability.
Go with the flow.
Yeah,
as the hippies say.
veer into it. So you were saying that you had a DMT trip like this?
Well, I basically just kept on experiencing bliss all the time, and I wanted to know what my shadow aspects were, so I could actually grow, and it told me.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, and that's the in framing this in terms of the all of these unpleasant elements being sort of the repressed projections, the disowned voices in this congress of self, that is like capital S self, that as soon as it's like a Saturnalia, that like the Roman tradition, one day a year where the masters all waited on the slaves and everything was reversed.
Oh wow.
And it's like, I mean, in that case, it's a pressure release valve that sort of cements this rigid social control, but it's also operating according to the same principle of effective shadow work, in the sense that as soon as you entertain, like clowning is really good for this, cross-dressing, all of these things where you entertain and actually embody the other, and if you do, like in the case of like the 3-2-1 process, the shadow work where something that's a third person you engage in the conversation as a second person you, and through playing both sides of that conversation, you realize that it's actually the first person I. That I am the monster that's showing up in my dreams, that I am that guy that I'm always disagreeing with, that by entertaining the other, by imagining the other in a playful way.
Well, I mean, it's all about embracing all your mini characters, and we've all got different aspects of ourselves with our parents, with our work colleagues, and especially when you're around people you don't really like. That's actually a part of you that you don't really like. So that's when you have to start checking in with yourself, going, why don't I like that person? Is it something that I don't like about myself that I see in that other person? Like, I was at Borderland this other festival, and there's this guy who came up to me, and I spent 1 hour speaking to him as he was the embodiment of everyone that hates me. So the audience know, I'm a unicorn, polyamorous unicorn sex cult leader. That's actually not true. That's what The Guardian have written about me and some other papers. It's not true. I wish it was true. It's not true. But basically there's a projection of myself out there in the world which people either love, and a lot of people are inspired by it, or they hate. And this guy was the embodiment of he saw me as his shadow. Like, he's a guy that doesn't want to show that he's showing off too much because he thinks it's egotistical, whereas I'm all about self-love. Like, show off, please. We're here to show off and show up for yourself. Like, we are all here to shine. Like, playing small doesn't serve anyone, whereas this guy saw it as an egotistical, egomaniacal thing if you're showing off. And so basically I was his complete shadow aspect, and I sat there listening to his story about me, and it was interesting because he was the embodiment of everyone that hates me. Like, in his eyes, I'm someone that goes out of my way, dresses up as a unicorn. I'm a tantracorn, the fabulous of unicorns, check it out. But he thinks I go out of my way to get girls. He thinks I do all these workshops just to get everyone to have sex with each other. He sees, I mean, obviously there's aspects of that is true, because everything is true and wrong at the same time, but he's I
mean, you do travel the world offering yoni massage, right? That's
SacredSexualAwakening.com. It's a thing. It's one of my biggest passions, and changed my life and healed healed myself and allowed me to give tools to women to empower themselves to get to ask for what they want for the first time. Because there's nothing wrong with desire. There's nothing wrong with harnessing your sexual energy for greater abundance and manifestation and sex magic.
So would you consider yourself an anarchist? Because
he described me as a provocateur.
Well, because I mean, there's like,
yeah, I'm here to fuck shit up.
there's the sense.
Of course, I'm here to fuck shit up.
It's like we were talking earlier about the structures of, like you build a dam because you're trying to prevent floods, because you've built your city on the floodplain, because you need to be near the water. And I think, and then we build this dam and it regulates things and it provides electricity, but it also fucks up the ecosystem, and there's this sense of, it's our rigidity, which is totally forgivable, because what are we going to do? We're going to build, like some people build houses on stilts, that solves the problem, but like for whatever reason in the West, we were like, what we're going to do is actually build the world's largest wall of concrete, and then
we will control nature.
Yeah, we will dominate nature. I'm reading right now. I'm reading William Irwin Thompson's The American Replacement of Nature. And it's about this.
Only in America. In Sweden, it's not like that. I've just been in Sweden.
Yeah,
it's phenomenal. A place of abundance. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, well, I want to talk about that in a minute, because the thing here is it's so clear that there's this line, there's this parallel between the way that we think about the body and the energies of the body, and the way that we think about the land and the energies of the land, and that the body really is something that the land is doing. I mean, we're all made out of this stuff. And so you see, like witch burning and dams and circumcision and monogamy enforced by the death penalty, and like all of this stuff is related. The corset is a dam. It was literally, the corset was for inhibiting a woman's ability to breathe, specifically, intentionally, because it was believed that women were supposed to be weak, and that they were supposed to be, that they were not supposed to be outspoken. And if you're always short of breath, how are you going to speak up for yourself?
Is this real?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So
the more I go into this work, as in being in service to the goddess, the more I see the conspiracies that's suppressing women. Like, it's unbelievable the feats man has gone through to suppress women. I've always seen women as the most powerful creatures on the planet, because it's up to them whether they have sex or not. We're just men who are in service to them. That's how I've always seen it, just because I've been raised by my mum, and like I'm surrounded by beautiful women and I barely have any male friends. Luckily I sleep with all my friends and they're all female. I surround myself with gay guys. Oh, genius. That's not true, a little bit true. But yeah, the more I study the vagina, the yoni, the sacred space, the more I understand myself, because I understand where I came from. Like, we are not taught how to touch, for example. We aren't. We had absent fathers, or I'm speaking for myself there. Had a very violent absent father who wasn't there for me, so I don't really know how to nurture a male friend of mine. I do have male friends. But I've been learning that. I've been tapping into my inner masculine to actually find out what it is to be a man. Like, I've never known what it is to be a man, because I've had the worst role models. And now I'm building my inner man, my inner brother, my inner father, because I took DMT and I saw Shiva. He came to me and then I was like, oh, he's really hot. Who's that blue guy? Oh, I've seen him somewhere. And I started to research into Shiva. Who the fuck is this Shiva dude? And he's incredible. He likes having sex for years and years and years. He's an incredible dancer, and he's just really buff and hot, and loves, animal print like I do. So yeah, tapping into my inner masculine has led me to a huge service to myself and to the community I'm in, and also service to the goddess.
Well, the thing with that too is,
and being present.
Shiva is also a musician. And you get into that thing of like the rhythmic cycle, the rhythm of breath. You're playing the flute, and the rhythmic cycle, and the difference between, if you look historically at the way that male or female magic was practiced, masculine magic tends to be about the control of nature, the exertion of the will, the projection of the will. Whereas feminine magic tends to be more about the alignment with natural cycles. And so, that's where you get back into this thing about, the breath and the rhythm of the breath being suppressed by the corset and the dam. And so there's this sense in which, this is where, I'm like, yes, because I love bringing it, for the sake of this podcast anyway, I love bringing it back again and again and again to the issue of time and temporality. And in this case, there's you're challenging the sort of like linear past future thing with this like open embodied present, but there's a rhythm in the presence. There's a rhythm that allows it to move, and it seems like the solution to flooding is a rhythmical society in some sense. That like in Cambodia, in these cities that live on floodplains where they don't have a dam, they build all their houses on stilts, and then they walk around when it's dry, and then they have boats, and they take the boat from house to house when it's wet, and they just adapt, and they remain present to the condition of that, that season, rather than
trying to control it,
rather than trying to exert. And that's the thing that we were talking earlier about, like the thing that disturbs me about these, like, I'm as excited as anyone about the prospects of meeting a digital mind, like meeting myself on the other side of the magic mirror and like the uploaded Michael or whatever. But for me, that's not, it's about that encounter with the other. It's not about a project of attempting to remain this guy forever. This like project of physical immortality is the logical, or rather illogical, conclusion of refusing that cyclical creation and destruction, and it's that rhythmicity that seems so. I mean, like, so how does that rhythmic quality? There's all these different cycles that are in the sexual experience and are like in the body, and like, how does that show up in your work?
The cycle, the breath is the key. Breath, movement, and voice. Like, I could get into states by myself, or with a client, or with a lover, through breath, cycles of breath. That would get me into DMT state. That would get me into divine union with God. And all we're doing is breathing in a certain way. Like, there's a thing that I do with clients when they're about to, I get them to reach peace. Like my 3-hour sessions, Sacred Sexual Awakening, which is these shamanic tantric journeys basically. And after they've connected their head, heart and yoni together, we go on this journey to discover themselves, and the final act is the clench and hold, which is where you breathe 29 times, and then the last 3 breaths are huge inhales and exhales, inhales and exhales, inhale and hold, and you clench everything and you press your back and arms onto the mattress, and like you tense everything whilst I'm working on your yoni with my hands, building up that energy and higher and higher and higher to the point that you go to another galaxy. It's super powerful.
It's the Body Electric School. Are you familiar with them? They did a male sexual massage course at Burning Man that I participated in. That used a very similar process.
It's powerful stuff.
Yeah, especially, I don't know if, I mean, it was especially powerful to be there with my partner doing this in a tent that was literally packed wall to wall with those people.
This is why people are
intimacy.
crying out for this.
Yeah.
People want to know how to touch themselves and each other. People want to connect.
And there was something about experiencing this really like sacred, ecstatic sexuality
that isn't just fucking.
In a partnered context, but in a situation where I'm like hanging out, like almost like a bathhouse vibe, where I'm like naked with like 50 other guys that I'm not, really like, I have no I'm like shoulder to shoulder with someone else that's having this kind of thing going on.
And it's super powerful in a group.
Yeah.
Because the mirror neurons are firing. Everyone's like raising each other up.
Yeah.
And
you come out of it and everyone's like, and you're exchanging these meaningful looks with these total strangers, and that's absolutely,
Yeah, the connection. I do a thing called a twin goddess awakening.
Okay.
As I'm a dancer and I'm ambidextrous, I'm able to channel this healing power called the light of God into my heart, feeling that love feeling in my heart, into my palms, and I have one goddess on my left hand side, another goddess on my right hand side, and I'm in the middle, and I create a circuit of energy where we are all channeling love. So we're all healing each other by loving ourselves, basically. And then I do the woo-woo stuff of moving the energy around, and then I
the woo-woo stuff, as opposed to all of this other stuff.
It's all woo-woo shit, but it works. I mean, I'm cured from loneliness, addiction, and depression because of this Tantra stuff. And then whilst I'm working on their yoni to activate and release tension in there, and to expand them with breathwork and pleasure, one person's feeling something, which is, ecstasy, bliss, or whatever, and then the other person starts to feel it too because of this whole mirror neurons thing, and they're both able to go on this simultaneous journey together because I'm doing exactly the same thing to both goddesses at the same time, raising each other's energies up, and we're all connected in this state of expansion, bliss, breathwork. Powerful stuff.
So you were saying earlier, you were talking about standing in front of this guy, listening to this guy talk to you, who was the embodiment of like all of the misunderstandings.
Yes.
And I have no idea. It was part of the fun of recording these conversations.
Or not recording them.
Or accidentally not recording an amazing conversation.
That was way better.
It really was.
It really was. We talked about time travel and everything.
Yeah.
My favorite thing.
Well, we'll have to get back to time travel.
Okay.
But I am kind of curious. So how did that resolve? Like, because I'm sitting here listening to you, I'm like, part of me is curious, like, how do you inspire two women to participate in that kind of a thing? But then, like, having that conversation is like evokes all of this like boy shadow bullshit.
That's your issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas I see this as an actual tool to awaken people. Like, if you take story out of this, and if you take away the idea that I'm fingering two girls at the same time, it turns into something different. If you turn it into a different story where this guy is actually channeling Shiva and is giving these women something that they've never experienced before, because all men, again, story, stereotypes, all based on facts usually, all men are there to get something. I'm not there to get anything. I'm here to give them a feeling of pleasure or expansion or triggering them so they see shadow aspects of themselves. And I've got nothing to gain. I'm there to hold space for them. I have these tools that can activate them into awakening them, the goddess within them.
Okay, so what switched for you? Because we didn't get to this. We got to this in the first unrecorded half, right? So what switched for you in, you said, just elaborate a little bit on this story of you get from the roving pack of hedonists and
from I hate myself to I love myself to how can I serve. That's the internal monologue, and the external world of that is heights of hedonism, being a fuckhead, traveling the world, going to every single Burning Man on the planet, being this fabulous unicorn, not being able to sustain it because I kept on dying, to having my awakening in 2000. Hey, actually, I just finished writing down my chronological awakening. Shall I read it to you?
Please.
Literally just finished it yesterday. My awakening. How long have we got? It's not that long.
It's as long as it needs to be.
Excellent. Good.
This is not a fast food podcast.
Excellent. So May 2014, did my first Tantra workshop with Esther and started a mythical therapy to help me with my addictions, relationship patterns, Tantra, self-love and achieving heart explosions sober. Heart explosions was stuff I used to do when I was on ketamine. Basically, it's this whole ceremony that I used to do. Now I actually do them in my workshops sober.
Okay.
Found out. August 2014, Burning Man. Couldn't get drunk, decided to quit drinking because I was upsetting too many people and almost dying all the time with kidney and liver damage. October 2014, my first ayahuasca ceremony. Learned to love myself, became a light warrior corn. She taught me how to dance differently, so now I float rather than being quite rigid. 2014, November, started training with the LED staff. That's why I'm here, to be a light warrior corn. I use a Jedi stick, basically became a Jedi. A staff as a form of meditation, and the flow jam. Basically, I invented a thing called light warrior corn meditation flow jam. So I swapped one addiction for another, training to become a Jedi, which led me to a path of finding superpowers. I had my first conscious relationship and tantric lover and was tripping balls when making love sober, and took acid and made love for hours, reaching states of nirvana. December 2014, spent Christmas with my other lover. I'm polyamorous, by the way. And was able. What's that?
I said I don't believe you.
Why not?
I really don't. I mean, in the sense, possibly in like a, because we went into this while we were eating lunch, to interrupt you here.
Yeah.
But there's.
What's the definition of polyamory?
Well, I mean, if most people think the misunderstanding of polyamory would be that it's about, and maybe this is how it's actually practiced, and maybe this is how it's healthily practiced, but it's still practiced within this realm of like duality and separation, and of like, you got to get, fairly good with yourself, but like,
yes,
it's still cultivating multiple relationships. Whereas like for me, when I hear this kind of work, like I don't know how I could possibly sustain the awareness required to do this work without treating it more like the way that you hear like Cuban, like congueros, when they're playing together. They're not jamming with each other. The way that they talk about it is that it's like they're jamming with God, and like whatever musical communication is occurring is going through the central router,
right.
And that you're actually, that there's an esprit or an egregore or some sort of containing unity that's like the ghost of that three-way exchange. Maybe you love what look like 3, 4, or 5 people or whatever, but it's actually
Five's optimum.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's a
three's minimum.
Well, hopefully we can get back to the number thing, but that it's like really, in that sense, aren't you sort of more? You're more like in love all the time.
Yes.
So you're not falling in love with specific people.
No, I've fallen in love with those specific people, and I'm in love with myself all the time. I don't use the term polyamory; it's got a dirty word. Same with Tantra, I don't use that word anymore. I use sacred sexual awakening, and with polyamory, I use the word transparent love. There's 5 pillars to transparent love, which I created, which are trust, honesty, communication, respect, and transparency. It's the 3rd principle of unicornia. And basically, if you live by those 5 pillars, you can't really fuck up. And as long as you only sleep with strong, inspiring people that enrich your life, it's only a win-win. Like, you're growing all the time. You're growing on how to communicate. You're growing on how to express your love. Hiya.
We're still working here. Are you aware of that? So we're gonna make a little bit of noise.
Okay.
So sorry.
It's okay.
Perfect time to go for a wee, maybe.
Yeah, maybe so.
But yeah, transparent love. It's my biggest passion and my biggest growth. I could say what for me is what works better because I've lived a monogamous life all my life. I was engaged once. I had very long-term relationships. What I've grown more is my polyamorous, transparent love lives. By far, exponentially huge growths with these strong, powerful women. Conscious relationships, unconscious relationships as well.
Well, let's get back to that at some point.
Tell me when it's on.
All right, so we are back with the troubled but brilliant recording project, Future Fossils Boom, special episode 1. Michael Garfield here with Shaft Uddin. And this is now like a 6 or 7 hour conversation. I don't know. At some point, I'm going to have to make some new friends. But
wait till the festival starts tomorrow. Don't leave me. It's okay. I'm fulfilled in myself. It's fine.
Yes. Complete unto ourselves, we've managed to discover horrifying conspiracies within each other.
Hey, remember that time I said it's future selves of us thinking about us right now, and we were sat charging your phone?
Yeah, we're those people that we knew that we would be. So this is a great.
This is happening.
This is a great thing because we just got into this whole rap about the past and the future and how they may be causing each other, and it's not so simple as. And I wanted to ask you at the end of our last little bit about you mentioned time travel.
Yes, I believe in time travel.
Okay, because
not externally but internally.
Because I asked you if you believed in fate.
No.
Okay, so this is where, because there's a
spiritual paradox. Hey, we're living in it right now.
So yeah,
everything and nothing at the same time. So I have this theory of time travel. I saw this through one of my meditations and sober meditations, and I basically realised it is recording, right? So I realised we have been alive since, like, I have been alive. Cells in my body have been alive since the dawn of time, and they will be alive until the end of time through my children and everything like that. So I believe if we go deep inside ourselves enough, we could go back into ourselves through time and ancestrally through our lineage until the beginning of time and forwards into time, because that's, through again on the cellular level into our children's and so on and so on. I also believe in space travel, that we could go deeper inside ourselves into the things that created, we're created from stardust. We could go inside those molecules and go to parts of the world and the universe that's out there by going within rather than going outwards.
Okay, yeah, so this is how I feel kind of the same way, and this is how I make sense of it. I think, if you look at it in terms of the body being, your organs come together, they form an organism. The organs are made out of tissues, the tissues are made out of cells, and so on. That if you want to reach back or reach forward in that way, then you end up. I think that the mistake that people make is in believing that it's like a human observer 4 billion years ago or whatever. Like, okay, so for example, the myth of Atlantis.
I wanted to speak about this.
Okay, so here's what I think is I think there's something. I think that we're all carrying around the racial memory of a traumatic event that we believe.
Lemurian crystal. I just
yeah. Okay.
I want to talk about that as well.
Yeah. So I think that, like, we found out recently that there's evidence that Graham Hancock just put out a book about the evidence that we have now that there was a comet impact 13,000 years ago, and that this comet impact may have flooded, hit the North American glacier and flooded the world, and that we have this intuition that the sea levels rose all at that time because it melted the northern ice cap, and so we have this trauma that's worked into us through epigenetic inheritance. All those little molecules binding to our DNA that are actually storing, in some crude sense, but very fine and complex, this the events of our lives, you know, are being coded in some way into this meta layer on our DNA. Not in the DNA itself, but on it. But I think if we go back even, so there's that sense of like, all of us remember there being some sort of like lost civilization, you know. But I think if we go back even further, like that comet impact is something that this Earth has been subject to repeatedly for millions and millions of years. And, you know, the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction of the comet, I mean, the asteroid that, you know, punctuated the end of the age of dinosaurs.
Or was it really us where we actually came in from a bioorganic ship where a dying star had all these souls on it and it landed here and it terraformed the planet to be like the other one?
Well,
another meditation I have.
I mean, but yeah, so there's the question of like what constitutes life, what constitutes a soul, what constitutes, you know, where, you know, how are these memories stored? You know, like if there's this thing about like people get heart transplants from a murder victim and they end up with memories of the murderer, you know? And I think that like there's the Oppenheimer quote, you know, I have become death, destroyer of worlds. You know, he's talking about Shiva.
Shiva,
yeah. And that's his statement upon witnessing the nuclear test, right? And it's like, well, where did that touches something really deep in us? And I was thinking about, they didn't know when they first launched the first nuclear tests whether they were going to set the entire sky on fire. They were genuinely concerned that they would. That testing this thing alone would be enough to kill everything. You know, that fear is actually, I think, rooted in the first mass extinction that we know of on Earth, which happened because algae learned to photosynthesize sunlight and carbon dioxide and create sugar and excrete oxygen. And the oxygen was a poison at the time. There was no life on Earth that knew how to metabolize oxygen. And basically, like, all animal life came out of this response to the situation where the most sophisticated life form on the planet at the time polluted the entire atmosphere and made it totally toxic for all life and drove all of the anaerobic bacteria underground. And it split the tree of life into the anaerobic and the aerobic, into the animals and plants and bacteria and, you know, that were capable of utilizing this metabolic waste and internalizing this fire and relying upon the fire and relying upon it for like a glucose metabolism. So like, this is like written into us from the very deepest level, and I think we mistake this in some respects for like memories of, like, we remember this on a cellular level. Our cells remember, like the cells in our guts remember being driven underground. And so you get all of these weird new age stories about aliens from the future coming to tell us that, you know, that people are channeling these beings that are saying, you know, we have to be careful or we're going to create this catastrophe and it's going to split the human race into surface dwellers and underground dwellers.
That's really happened.
Yeah, the DIA, you know, Denver International Airport underground bunkers and stuff. And people are acting on this knowledge. People are like building bunkers, preparing for a catastrophe that happened 2 billion years ago. You know, so that's my thought on that.
Are we turning into that bacteria that destroyed everything back then? Are we polluting the atmosphere so that there will be another divide of some sort? Maybe
it is this thing of like a cycle that continues to repeat itself at a higher level of order, and then, you know, so that we end up creating, because what are we going to do with all this trash, right? Like we have to be able to metabolize it somehow. We have to turn pollution into food, you know? So yeah, we're creating new life forms that eat garbage. Yeah.
I actually have every faith in the human existence and humanity. I was brought up on Star Trek, so I believe in a utopian society. This is why I used to go to every single Burning Man on the planet, a place where money doesn't exist. Everyone's gifting, like there isn't scarcity. Everyone's embodying their most magical being. Like they're allowed to express themselves in the way they want, and no longer is there a need to consume and like make money. There is no such thing as money. You're just giving yourself to everyone in the most magical way. I believe society will end up like that easily, because once we start working on ourselves, we'll start overflowing, and that overflowing will just go into helping other people. For example, when like you get couples and they've fallen in love and they see friends who are single and they go, oh my god, I know somebody's perfect then, because we're in love and love is great, so we want to share it with everyone. That's how we are as humans. Once we start overfilling ourselves with love, we just want to keep on helping other people.
But Star Trek has the prime directive. So Star Trek, you're not allowed to go around to other planets and being like, we really think you'd be better if you were civilized.
No, of course not, because that's what they did in Christianity. That's why. I believe that we will start flourishing as we're in that point of, well, to be honest, we're actually in a point of the most amount of peace on this planet has ever experienced.
By some measures.
Yes, as in like, war measures.
Yeah. Well, what do you mean, like deaths per capita?
As in wartime, peacetime scenario.
I don't know. I mean,
I saw it on the internet.
Yeah.
I believe YouTube.
Well, you're talking about the Christopher Ryan versus Steven Pinker argument. The Steven Pinker is Better Angels of Our Nature. And he writes this whole thing about how we've gotten more and more peaceful. And then Christopher Ryan, who's a paleoanthropologist, went and said, "Well, you're cherry picking your data, because there's actually really strong argument that all of these pre-modern tribes were very peaceful, and then we introduced scarcity to them, and that we're more peaceful than we were 1,000 years ago, but maybe less peaceful than we were 15,000 years ago."
Yeah, so I want to know what happened before religion. Was there a matriarchal society? Was it all about nature? Was it all about sharing, living off the land? Like, I heard there's a museum somewhere where they have a whole exhibition dedicated to matriarchal societies, which is, nurturing, loving, living off Mother Nature, Gaia. And then in the other room, it's about patriarchal society, war. What happened before religion? This goes to the ancient civilizations of, Lemuria, Atlantis.
Okay, so let's
Egypt.
Let's bracket. Yeah, let's bracket.
I get my knowledge off YouTube and Facebook.
Let's bracket the veracity of these things, and let's discuss them. Like I like all of this being like discussed as if, because my idea of time is very complicated and multifarious, and like maybe it's just that like reality is something that is like an agreement between perspectives, human and non-human perspectives. So like there may be pockets of this planet that have a completely different history than other pockets. Oh, there's the woo, the festival woo. But let me hear, because you're holding this crystal. We're here at a psytrance festival. We might as well go there.
Okay, so the ancients, basically, I got this crystal. I never really believed in that hippie shit. In fact, I'm very much from the corporate world. Art director, worked in advertising for 15 years, very much in the normal world. And then the awakening happened. Now I see things and hear things.
Well, now we got to talk about the awakening first.
Well, I read a bit of it.
Yeah. Okay. So you went through it was
polyamory. We got to polyamory.
And
you said I wasn't really
psychedelic healing. Yeah. Okay.
And I was talking about transparent love. Well, basically, loads of things have happened, and I've catalogued my awakening like through a chronological thing that has happened in my life, and it's gotten weirder and weirder and weirder, and the more I go down the rabbit hole, the more people appear with these gifts. And
so the switch for you was getting to giving, from like trying to take something out of life
rather than chasing life. Now it's all about life comes to me. Like I got given a power up chip, Moldavite, I was told, I'm all about superpowers, so I was told, Moldavite, if you have that crystal on you, you could accelerate your spiritual growth. What you could learn in 1 year, you could learn in 3 months. I was like, fuck, I want that, I fucking want that crystal. And then lo and behold, it landed in my hand at the end of my trip in New York last year, where I cured myself of loneliness when I was amongst these amazing, powerful, divine masculine men who are all actively trying to change the world in some way. And there's this, it's almost like Xavier's School of the Gifted, where these men were getting together and they were all world changers in some way. Like one of the main guys, he invented Buzzworthy.
Okay, yeah.
Online thing. And yeah, they were just all talking about their vulnerabilities and sharing their emotions and talking openly and crying and hugging and actually being a gentle warrior of love. And he gave me this Moldavite crystal, which showed me I was having the most ridiculous dreams for the first few nights I was wearing it. And the Moldavite said to me, you've attracted so much light into you, you're growing in such a way that you're like a juggernaut of light. So you don't have to keep on chasing and being that hare and running fast to get all this information. You're like the turtle who could just sit here and things will just come to you. That's when I realised I no longer need to chase life. Life comes to me. And it's true, it does now. And things just keep on coming into my lap. And this Lemurian crystal was something that was said by Sweden's #1 unicorn. She said,
Is that determined by YouTube hits, or what is that?
Just Facebook, and so like the world saying she's Sweden's #1 unicorn.
Can is that a self-declared thing? Can I say I'm the #1 paleontologist futurist?
Well, if it's validated in some kind of press article or anything like that, or a TED talk, yeah.
Okay, all right.
You gotta have at least one form of external validation.
I'm sure I can get somebody to say that.
then you got it. But yeah, apparently if you meditate with this, you could go back and get some knowledge about the ancient history of Lemuria. And I did this. I actually meditated with it. Me and another lover did, and we both learnt a few things.
So.
Or are we projecting onto it?
Well, because here's the thing, right? Is that the whole first half of this conversation, or like the first 2/3 of it, this like the part that we skipped, or that was lost to the digital record, was about how this profound change in your life for you occurred around the. This issue of love and seeing love as something outside of you versus seeing love as something inside of you. So the question I guess I have is like, if you assume it's got to be like a holistic shift, right? Like, to what extent? And this is what I was getting about earlier. Is like, if I'm projecting the image of an ideal lover onto all of these people, how do I know that I'm not actually projecting? Like, for example, Rupert Sheldrake, the British scientist, he has this research on the eyes. It's very like it kind of confirms this shamanic thing that the eyes don't just receive information, but they actually transmit information. Because people can feel when they're being stared at.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he wrote a book about that.
Yeah, the sense of being.
You wrote a book about that.
He wrote a book about that. Like, I read it, so yeah.
The sense of being stared at, right?
Yeah.
So there's this shorthand would be like a quantum handshake that we're actually, or like Theosophist Rudolf Steiner talks about that by observing a flower or something, that we're exalting the spirit of this vegetable intelligence by observing it as a human being, and that there is a sense in which that this gets back to like the biblical Adam naming the plants and animals. That naming is like a form of sacred recognition, and that like this gets into like insouling technologies. Like to name a thing gives it this life. It raises it to a new level of being, and like to observe something turns it from a possibility into an actuality, right? So I feel like stories like this, it's like, it's not so much whether or not they're projections as it is how many people are projecting it and how many people does it take for us to reach critical mass and that story to become true, you know? But I'm curious, okay, so like with all of that in place, like I want to hear like how this went and like what you learned.
Well, one of the best quotes I heard about me, something about, you know, mass knowledge. It was basically on my YouTube video, million hits. The best quote, like the comments are fucking hilarious. I love them. They're really damaging. They're fucking brilliant.
The YouTube is
I know,
trollicious.
it's amazing. And the best thing about trolls is they actually look like trolls. And one of them was, if one person thinks something crazy, they call him delusional. If a group of people think something crazy, they call it a cult. If society thinks something crazy, they call it fact. So, you know.
Well, fact is, like the word fact means a construction, like it's an artifact. You know, it's something that we make. And there's all sorts of really good academic writing on, you know, how we didn't used to have facts. We didn't call things facts. You know, or William Irwin Thompson says, a fact requires a theory like a flame requires an atmosphere. You have to make certain assumptions in order to believe a thing to be true, you know. But I still want to hear more about this crystal and like what you think you have.
Am I projecting on? Yeah,
divined from this thing.
Well, this one time on Iboga, I came out and we all hugged a tree, and it was very calming and grounding. And a friend of mine said, if you ask a tree a question, it'll give you an answer. And so every time I'm in a bit of doubt, I always go and ask a tree, and it literally gives me the answer straight away. To the point that when I go towards a tree, my internal dialogue goes, "There's no point asking it; you already know it."
Okay.
So this is the thing about this this crystal. I was meditating with it, and I did see some visions, which were these little kids running around in these pretty awesome outfits. Looked a bit like Princess Amidala from Pawn Star, Phantom Menace. And yeah, then she there's this huge explosion, and then this monstrous smoke was overgulfing everything, and the city went underneath. But in the caves and stuff, there was these crystals, which are the brain cells of this planet, and everyone was like meditating to these crystals, and they were downloading their entire history and source books into these crystals, and that's where their memories of themselves lay until they were found again. That's what the vision saw.
Okay, so I have to say that for what this is worth, and we are thoroughly, if the podcast co-host were here to like rein me in, we may not even be having this conversation, because he is a little bit more beholden to like science and engineering in the classical sense. But you're not the only person that's told me this notion of embedding memory into crystal forms, and that it's not that necessarily these crystals have like.
Remember, I never used to believe in any of this shit, by the way.
Yeah.
Until things started happening to me, so my own personal experience made me go, oh, actually.
Because I wonder, like, I've had these experiences, like my first DMT trip, where I came out of it convinced that we were going through this phase of electromagnetic pole reversal on the planet, and that there were certain hormonal effects that would happen that would basically lead to an endogenous DMT release due to the decay and reversal of the Earth's magnetic fields. And I'm not convinced now that's I saw it as this catastrophic event unfolding over the span of days. And now it seems like we are going through that, but it may take centuries. And so it's I think we have this bad habit of people as like assuming that the visions that we have are going to like take place within our lifetimes. But nonetheless, as soon as I had that vision, I had never researched anything about what they call this. There's an entire field called biogeomagnetism that's about the relationship between human hormone and animal hormonal cycles, the Earth's magnetic fields, and the solar activity. And there was already like fairly well developed theories about how solar cycles affect trends in culture and trends in history, and that certain solar maxima and minima can be correlated with like cycles of the intensity of violent conflict and like certain aesthetic trends in culture. You know, like you flip, like it's called the Sekhmet hypothesis, and it says, you know, you flip between like free love hippie kind of culture, you know, it's like an aesthetic, and then you move into like, you know, leather goth straight jackety, like you go from like, you know, the Flaming Lips one decade, and then like Marilyn Manson, and you know, and you go back, and then it's like, you look at it, it's like the 80s were kind of one way, the 70s, and then the 60s, and you get this, it's like every 11 years or something. And I just, you know, this is not something that I was primed with going into this experience. And I've heard my friends who really intense lucid dreamers have told me that they've had these dreams where they were Atlantean wizards that were programming crystals that with human consciousness and embedding memories in the crystals, and that they were doing kind of dark things with them. And my buddy was like, basically like, I have to like deal with the fact that I was kind of a bad person and abusing technology, and I got my like just desserts in this past life, and that we got what we deserved. And I don't know how I feel about that.
Do you believe in past life regression? I just paid $400 for my one.
Why'd you do that when you can talk to a tree for free?
I know, right? Well, to be honest, this trip that she took me on was clearer than ayahuasca and iboga, and it was just myself. And she was just literally guiding me through. Like she 1 minute she'd be like saying, "What are you wearing on your feet? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 now," and then I'd just describe what I was wearing. And one of the past life regressions I had was I was a pharaoh god king from another planet who defeated the Anunnaki and freed my people. I was like the chosen one. It went way deeper, and she activated my DNA and stuff like that, and things actually have changed. But how true is that? Like, a lot of spiritual people use these past life things as a crutch. Like my former lover, she's like a famous tantrika in London, and she put a lot of blame on the end of our relationship to men betraying her back in her priest days in her past life, and it's carried on into this life. I'm like, I don't believe this. This is why I paid $400 to find out, is this true?
Yeah, did I abuse somebody once?
But like,
well, it's fair to say that we probably all did.
Yeah.
You know, if past lives exist, we were all the executors of genocide and the victims of another genocide, and it's time for us to just kind of
from the Anunnaki's enslavement. But is it really? I mean, is there only a set amount of souls that keep on going into flesh vehicles all the time?
No.
I don't believe that.
I don't believe that either, but I do think that there are certain recurring.
Well, hey, you wanna join us?
Sure.
What? We have
an audience member who's
participating now. a third member of this channel. What's your name, man?
Camillo.
Camillo. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. What's your name?
Closer. I'm Shaft.
Shaft. Nice. And you?
Michael Garfield. And this is Future Fossils podcast, episode 11.
Oh, cool.
Just so you know.
Cool. Nice.
We're talking about time.
Oh, nice. Well, from what I've learned from people who speak about past life regression or experiences of having these dreams and having these visions of past lives, I do always seem to notice that there are recurring themes within the past lives that you remember, because obviously you can't remember them all, or maybe someone can, but you know, most people can't. And what I see is that there are these recurring themes in the life they have now that, you know, overlap with what they see from those past lives. You know, there are these recurring themes of maybe being abused by a lover, or, you know, being the victim of a certain thing, or being someone who does a certain thing, you know, a certain thing you consider bad to do, and they fall into the same patterns in this life, but in another sort of circumstance, which allows them to actually do it differently this time, and in that way learn from past experience in the now, in this life. And even for me myself, from the things that I've experienced, it seems to be true. So that's why I've become a believer of that. I'll always be skeptical. I always think, maybe everything I believe isn't true. But on the other hand, there are these patterns you can recognize within these kinds of phenomena. So it seems quite plausible to me that there is this sort of cycle of learning that a soul goes through.
Yeah.
And also, I don't know that the question of how literally true it is exactly the right question, because again, maybe what we think of as literal truth is more a consequence of where we are as a people historically right now, that we don't sort of realize that we're in this Russian doll of nested dreams, and so we regard local reality as reality, and then you get out of that atmosphere and it gets more and more diffuse relative to where we are.
When you have your awakening, like I had my life planned out and I was very happy living that life, and I didn't want to be where I am right now, but due to having to wake up to myself and deal with my own shit, I've gone really, like I'm just on the edge of the rabbit hole looking in. And this reality that I live now is way better than the old one. It's harder because I'm having to deal with every single emotion and every single trigger and every single part of myself, but I'm feeling more, I'm living more, I'm loving more.
I think that's the thing that makes living more consciously such a good thing to do, because on one hand, the harder stuff gets harder, but the better stuff gets better. So.
Or everything just plateaus in a steady wave rather than a high and a massive low and a high and a low. It's all crashing, it's all emotions, it's all where you become a bit more like a Jedi, and the stream of emotions is a bit more steady, but everything's always going upwards.
Okay, so
with a dip once in a while, but very rare.
You're right about this. There's an interesting thing about, it's like not everyone can possibly remember being Cleopatra, right? Not everyone could have been a Lemurian wizard. Come on, like what's going on there? Why do we have these recurring patterns in these spaces? In these these non-ordinary states of consciousness. Like I have a friend who took a year to turn on as many people for their first DMT trip as he could. And his payment was that he would have them write a full trip report, and then he went back and he basically cross-examined all of the trip reports and found patterns in all of these people's experiences. People who had no previous programming or preloading, they didn't know what to expect, and yet things kept showing up in all these people's trips. One of which was, and you mentioned earlier that you saw this blue man.
Shiva.
Yeah. And it's like, well, 19 out of 123 of these DMT trips that he recorded from people's first times included the blue lady. That there was this specific figure, and that every time she showed up, she was there to reveal that the DMT space was not what it appeared to be. She was a destroyer of illusions.
Yes.
And so you're like, so here is something that is transcendent to culture. It's not particular to a person's cultural upbringing.
Exactly.
It might be that he was using the same substance and that it's triggering, that there's something going on there, but he ended up making a field guide of the entities that inhabit that space based on this proto big data analysis of DMT tripping.
So every time I've taken DMT, I've always seen these Cirque du Soleil-like characters, these jesters always luring me in. They always pop out of my visuals and then they take me into my trip without fail. And I've done a few DMT trips now.
A few, yeah.
So, do they appear in anyone else's? They're always these sexy, like very Cirque du Soleil sexual characters.
Yeah, that theme appears over and over, and the shape changes, the appearance changes. but the character is constant.
Yeah.
This notion, and Terence McKenna talked about that a lot, about it having a very circus vibe.
Yes, why? What is that?
Well,
this is what I'm talking about, the narrative strand of Iboga. Like, it catalogues the masculine side of your ancestral lineage. And that's what happened when I had my Iboga trip. And, like, ayahuasca, there's always a snake or something in it. Like, there's always a narrative strand to these trips.
I heard this weird story about this kid in Michigan who ordered ayahuasca off the internet without any knowledge of what it would do. I think it was Michigan. It's some Midwestern American kid. Ordered ayahuasca, did it at home alone without any ritual container, without any psychological priming, without any knowledge of the indigenous traditions around it, and had like jaguar and anaconda visions.
Yeah.
So clearly there's something, I think it's just like we were talking about with the eyes and information coming in and also moving out through the eye, that reality is not in a particular place. Reality is in the relationships between things.
But why did he see that?
Well, I mean...
And he had no knowledge of all the other shit.
Well, yeah. Have you read Jeremy Narby's book? You're not much of a reader. So Jeremy Narby, Cosmic Serpent. It's like, and it's a legendary work in psychedelic and anthropological literature. This guy went down to the Amazon because he was helping the native peoples catalog their medicinal plant knowledge so that they could not be exploited by corporations. And one of the things that came up for him again and again was, he's like, how did you find out that this plant cured this particular ailment? Like, how did you find out that this plant was good for treating a snake bite? And they were like, well, the plants told us. And he's like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, this plant, the flower has these two little fangs on it. And it's saying to the monkey, this is for snakes. It's communicating to us because we're visual thinkers. And there's a coevolutionary relationship that's ancient. It's an ancient relationship. And so we as modern people are surprised by this thing. And he's like, well, why is it that all of the world around has this relationship to snakes specifically? You know, why is it that in every shamanic or medicine tradition around the world, even in places where there are no snakes,
same with dragons as well.
Yeah, what is the snake thing? What's the snake thing? And what he came to was, he believes that in these visionary states, they're actually getting a microscopic view of the workings of the internal dimensions of the human body, and that they're actually looking at their own DNA.
I've had visions of that during mushroom trips, where I would actually, I would be sort of sunk into my own body in a way that I closed my eyes, and what I would see was these. It would like zoom into my cells, and it would like show me these patterns weaving together to form new shapes, and it was like I was looking at the molecular structure of my own body as I was lying there. And I think it's very interesting, because I think that there is a way for a body in different states of consciousness to actually reinterpret its own signals and to reform that into something that you interpret visually, when it's actually signals that usually are interpreted in another way in your brain. So, and that's actually a very interesting thing that most psychedelics do, is that they connect different brain regions to reinterpret signals that are usually interpreted in one spectrum. So, for example, something that you see, just the way that music becomes visual in some trips, you're reinterpreting your audio signals through your visual cortex, and that happens on many different levels in ways we still don't understand. So I think it's quite possible that there are these recurring patterns for everyone based on how our DNA functions and based on how these compounds function, that will actually give us these, also with DMT, these recurring archetypes, dependent on how your DNA works and how yours is. You're going to see a different archetype. Some will have that archetype of the circus, and others will run into different types of entities. But there are definitely categories within which that goes. So
well, I notice this with different schools of spirituality. Like, I use the energy signatures of Shiva Shakti. I'm not a Hindu or anything like that. And I channel Shiva, and
I'm not a Hindu. I just channel Shiva, and I'm a tantric awakener, and I kind of look like
10 principles of unicornia. That's what I'm about. But there's people from other spiritual schools that believe in angels. I reckon it's all the different it's all the same type of energy entities, but we're taking it from what we can relate to. So people talk through angels. I talk through energy signatures of Shiva.
Yeah,
right.
I think that a lot of those entities actually share the same energy signature, yet based on your culture and your own genetic story, you interpret it in a different way. Like it forms a different visual.
Yeah.
But the energy signature is the same. That's why there's also these overlapping patterns in all kinds of figures of gods and demigods throughout different cultures all over the world.
What I've realised is, because I've been studying religion for a little while now, because I have my own 10 principles of unicornia channeled in Jerusalem, just as valid as all the other ones. 4,000 people believe in it.
You're almost at the institutional level where you need to watch out that you don't create a priesthood.
Wow. That's what I'm trying to do.
Maybe you should.
Exactly, yeah. You get a free fucking building in London, apparently, if you build a church.
In the United States, you don't have to pay taxes if
This is why I want to have a church. I'm not even joking.
This is why my dad doesn't like the idea of me starting a church, because he thinks I'm doing it for tax fraud. And I'm like, no, I'm ordained. It's real.
Yeah, See, I actually want to build a galactivation temple. Where people come together every Sunday. Again, I've been witnessing stuff all around the world and how religion works. Like, there's always some kind of 10 principle of something. 10 principles of Burning Man, 10 commandments, the 12 steps, AA. So I have my own principles, 10 principles of unicornia. And also, every religion always has some kind of way of opening you up through sound. So be it mantras, hymns. What I want to do is bring power ballads into this, opening up everyone through the joy and playfulness of power ballads. Then the ceremony starts. I'll be telling them about.
Holy shit, dude! Let me help you write some unicorn power ballads.
Amazing! Yes.
Yeah, I'm into it.
You do that thing.
I love writing power ballads. Let's go.
I fucking love it. And then every Sunday, someone comes, because I'm all about having your own principles to live by. Why share other people's when you don't truly believe in it, when you can create your own? And I believe in radical self-acceptance. Like, accept your own selves, live by your own rules, and my church will be all about embodying your own mythical, empowered self. So you come along there, sparkled up in your own mythical self. We'll all celebrate together, and at the end of it, there's always, like in all the conscious communities, there's always a Sunday dance. So ecstatic dance. So it's moving our energy around, sharing, and just playing. And that's a great way to end your weekend, start your week.
So you do it on a Saturday?
Sunday.
Or Sunday?
Sunday morning, it's 11 a.m. I already have the place involved in Sweden, the land of abundance and peace and blondes.
And blondes.
Of course.
Sounds good.
So yeah, maybe it's a good time to wrap around to this time travel deal. Because for me, it's like all of this stuff. Like Camille, you were saying, it's like it's being interpreted through a human body, and so there's a sense in which we know that something is happening, but it's being filtered through this stained glass window, and we can't see around the filters that we are. This was the Jeremy Narby thing. He eventually came out of that research and he discovered that there's an entire Russian science examining biophotonics, which is the study of light in the body, actual photons. And what he found was that the DNA is this flexible quasi-crystal. People approve of this. Yes.
We believe in the quasi-crystal.
That it's this rapidly jittering, super complicated crystal, and it's a crystal that like a piece of quartz, if you squeeze a piece of quartz, it emits a small electric charge. It's the piezoelectric effect. It's what powers it. It's what the principle behind digital watches, guitar pickups, microphones. So he's like, the same principle is happening in the DNA. and that every time the DNA changes shape, certain regions of it are being squoze and emitting light. And it's a single photon at a time, so it's actually technically a laser because it's coherent light. And that he came to this conceit that there's actually a biophotonic internet that already exists that we're just simply trying to reproduce with our fiber optic internet. And that DNA in different organisms is communicating with the DNA in other organisms all the time. And that's why certain regions of DNA are what we call, like the junk DNA, are these like massively repeating sections that actually function more like an antenna. And that the DNA is not so much storing information as it is conducting information from this field of communication. And so like it's drawing a specific human experience or non-human experience out of this field of possibilities, like a TV receiver, because you turn the set and then the crystal inside the television is attuned to specific wavelengths, and then you end up watching like Bonanza instead of Seinfeld or whatever. So in light of that, are all of these past life regressions and channeled intelligences and all these things, it just seems like maybe the medieval view of things as this endlessly regressing like celestial spheres is closer to the truth. It's like the supra-literal truth. It's like all of our literal truth actually exists within this wash of stuff that is less and less true the further we get away from it. But if we were to move over there, maybe the things that we think are completely impossible are like on the other side of the sphere. And if we move to where the sun is setting, then we'd have a half different reality. And if we chased it all the way around to where it's night, we'd have a completely different reality where all the things that we think are true are impossible. If you mapped it all in 3 dimensions.
I think it's also very interesting what you mentioned about the photonics, is that there's actually been this experiment done with DNA where they attach photons to DNA, and the later they remove the DNA from the space which they use to do that, and the photons actually stay within the shape that they had when they were bound to the DNA. So in a certain way, there's a sort of a memory retention of the movement that the DNA gives to the photons, the energy states that they go in. And so, we're touched by light all the time, and a lot of light reactions with photons happen in all of our bodies all the time, in plants and animals and everything. And so it sort of shows that there is this sort of photonic memory going on all the time. And also these people who researched these photons within the body, and they try to map it all out, they also try to map the meridians. They also find out that we emit a special type of photons sometimes. They're called biphotons, which is basically a photon of the exact same energetic charge, but they're like a couple, like they come together, and we actually radiate them. Like if you would actually be able to zoom in on them and really see them, it would be like showing someone's aura, which is very interesting. And if you think about it, that there is a sort of memory retention in those photons, then we're always having these fields around us. Like everything that has DNA is always having these sort of fields around them in which there's information contained, and we're always picking that information up. We're always picking up those signs. All forms of life are. So in a way, we're always sharing the history of our DNA, not through chemical processes, but through light processes.
I only just reactivated my ability to see auras at Borderland. It was quite something. Like back in the days, like 2000, I was going through a bit of a thing, and I was able to see auras, and then I was like, oh, this is really weird.
A bit of a thing?
I basically suppressed my superpowers, and I basically chose to live a shallower form of existence consciously, so I wouldn't have to deal with anything about politics or religion or anything more substantial, because what really made me happy were, in fact, it was a quote by the Finchmeister in American Pie: getting paid and getting laid. That's all I ever cared about, and it made me super happy until 2 years ago, where I had my awakening. And at Borderland, activated this thing I once had, which was able to see my aura. And I was with a lady who we were both mythical, magical creatures dancing in a way that we were moving our energies around, which is what I do in my Tantra Corn Dance into Bliss workshops, where everyone can move energy around and do conscious touch and like feel things without touching. And yeah, we activated our auras again just through the power of grace. And yeah, I haven't done it since because I've been too busy, but yeah, it was a very magical thing, because I was like, fuck, babes, I can see auras again. She's like, oh my god, so can I. It's like, fuck, this is amazing, let's go and make out.
So some things change. Michael Crichton talked about that in his autobiography. You know, he received an Ivy League medical training and was a super skeptical, rational guy, and then was, if I remember, just sort of conned into, or his friend really insisted that he get into this workshop in New Mexico where they were teaching people how to feel and see auras, and it freaked him out because he was experiencing something that he was
Can't explain.
that, well, beyond not being able to explain, he actively believed it was not the case. He actively believed it was bullshit. And yet he followed the program. He took the steps. You know, he did the exercises that he was recommended. And it led to the result, the promised result, which was to being able to see not just auras around people, but he said he looked out into the hills, and he saw the glow generated by all the biophotonic. He didn't use those terms because he wasn't thinking about it in terms of a mechanism, but it does seem like there is. For me, that's important. For me, I need, like, I really want, I don't need, but I really want to have at least a working explanation.
See, I used to be like that until weirder and weirder and weirder shit just kept on happening, to the point that I just accept it now. Like, in Tantra, we are always working with energies, like, constantly. It's just a part of what we do now. Like, you could create energy right now. So here, put your hands together and just rub it as hard as you can. Really hard, really. No faster than that, Jesus, fuck. Properly, really go for it. And now hold still. And now pull it together a centimetre apart. Centimetre. And just move your hand, just like that a little bit. And can you feel any kind of thing between your fingers, your hands?
I always feel a circling motion between the palms of my hands. There's an energy flow there, and when you put them together, one goes one way, the other goes the other way, and it creates this vortex in between your hands.
That's exactly.
It's really nice to make. It's really nice to make energy balls with that. It's a lot of fun.
Qigong, all that shit. That's energy. You can channel love and light into it and heal it and use it as healing energy. I put that healing energy on a yoni, i.e. a vagina, and that creates powerful expansion in women and an activation within them. So yeah, there's this energy shit which is real, which is probably just heat, but it's more than that.
Well, it can't just be heat, because I've seen
exactly, because it's not.
I've sat in a circle of people where they've put a little pinwheel on a pin, and it's resting there, and it's under a glass dome, and you just kind of point at it in the direction you want it to spin. And in a group of people, you can kind of like sit there, and some people are clearly better at it than other people. Some people can get the little thing that you're clearly not touching, and you're not blowing on it, and your heat isn't getting through there. It's happening way too fast for it to be body heat. And yet some people are clearly like, I'm gonna push it the other way, and there's a physicality to it.
I do that with smoke in a bonfire. When I'm around a hippie circle and there's smoke coming towards me, I just go like that. I put my thumbs up, actually. I do that, both thumbs up, and just will it to move the other way, and it always does. And I just get people around me, come on, let's all will it, and it goes the other way. I don't know what it is. I just stop questioning. Like,
I think it's really just that you learn to influence your own energetic field. It's just, you have this. Everyone has this field around them, and it's just a matter of learning how to move your energy within your body, but later also without your body, so to speak. And it's really nice because for me, I've been doing that for quite a while in my life, because it was very natural for me as a child to do that. And I've had a lot of people along the way who, you know, I start talking about that and want to learn more about it, and they're very skeptical, and they don't really believe it. They really believe there's chi and all these things, you know. They're like, oh, that's all, you know, this hippies bullshit. And I just show them, and I'm like, just follow these steps, just do this with me, and they really feel it.
Yeah, when people embody something, the brainwaves start changing. They start to expand, and that once they've embodied something, felt it, then they believe it. And that's what happened to me going down this path. Like when I felt all this weird shit going through my body, I just don't question anything now. Like the fact that I lived a life without sex magic, and I have a life with sex magic. I had a life without coincidences, without synchronicities, without manifestations, because I didn't know about it. Now I'm more aligned to my truth. Now things just pop into place all the time. Like it's not that hard anymore. Like if I think it's like Burning Man. You go to Burning Man, everyone's heart is open. You can think of something, and people in a gifting mentality. It's like, I really want to drink. Oh, I've got a drink. Here you go.
That's what I love about these festivals, because every time I go to one of them,
you think of something,
everything manifests exactly as my intention goes.
Yeah.
And as long as I'm within a loving intent, everything goes perfectly.
Yeah.
But once I lose that, I've had that, you know, that I was tripping for too long, and it was just like I was only in my pain mode, and I was feeling all the negative things, and all the coincidences stopped. Was before that, you know, people that I was thinking about were like coming right around the corner just 10 seconds after I think of them, in a row, like 10 people in a row that I was thinking of. They were just like popping up, and all the things that I wanted. Oh, now I feel like smoking a joint, and someone hands me a joint like 2 seconds later.
In that open, loving vibe.
Yeah.
Like Koh Phangan, when I was there, for me that's like a sustainable version of Burning Man. No one has a diary, no one organises anything. For someone like me who used to work in advertising, I'm all about deadlines. I was like, but we've got to diarise it. It's like, it's in flow. If it'll happen, it happens. And it's literally like that now. It's like, I think of someone and then they'll appear without me having to bring them.
So this is an interesting thing, because like a big part of you guys have never even heard this podcast. A big part of this podcast, this is all framed around exploring the nature of time and what it is. I mean, we obviously go off on huge tangents, and it's great. But like, I love bringing it back to, because, you know, I'm a super Capricorn type, perhaps, or something.
And I'm a unicorn.
Capricorn,
it's a
unicorn.
mythical
Yes.
match made in heaven.
Yeah. So, there's something about, when I asked you earlier if you're an anarchist, you know, provocateur. Yeah, there's this thing about my experience of Burning Man was that it's like a physical version of the internet. Every camp is like a website. You know, the camp might be from people from all over the world, but they all have the same kind of, they're all existing in what William Rowan Thompson calls the same noetic polity. As we get more and more capable of communicating with each other across the globe, and eventually beyond the globe, right, that we're going to align along not geographical boundaries, but mental boundaries, that we're going to filter in the things that are sort of either intentionally or unintentionally aligned with who we are. So like rule 34 of the internet is if it exists, there's porn of it, right? And so all of these people, you couldn't have had furry conventions before the internet, because everyone who was dressing up in an animal suit to have sex thought they were the only person. You know, or they had to invent a secret code that they could put in the classifieds or whatever. And so like here at Burning Man is like, this is the physical reality of it. But in that sense, it's also everything happening at once, you know? And it seems kind of, to me, I'm curious what you think about the future, is like, do you see that as becoming an inherent characteristic? Is this sort of unscheduled, fluid simultaneity a characteristic of the future? Like as we
think it is.
As we start recording more and more and more all the time, then we're not only living in the past more, but we're extracting knowledge and wisdom out of that is projecting forward, and we're getting better and better at anticipating, you know, what the weather's going to be like in a week, you know, where what the fashion is going to be like next season. Google wants to know what you're going to want before you even know what you want it. They're going to get so good that they're selling you the exact thing before you even ask for it. So in that sense, it's like everything's happening at once. Doug Rushkoff wrote that book, Present Shock, when everything happens at once. And that could be kind of terrifying because it's what he called narrative collapse. It's the collapse of this idea that there's one past and one future, because now you're existing in a world where there's 50 million cultures and all of them have a different story and they're all obviously got a piece of it. How do you schedule a world like that?
Well, this is the thing. So since being on this journey, I've only been to London. So in January I went to shaman school in Hawaii. Then I quit my career in advertising, and then I went back to advertising for 3 weeks to make some money and leave. And then ever since then I have been on this. My mantra is abundance and flow. So I never schedule anything. I never know where I'm going to go. Life organises my life for me. So the only time I've actually looked at my diary and gone, I need to write something down, because I'm all about deadlines. I've got things to do list. My life used to be governed by goals. It's when I go back to London. I've got to go back to London in a week, and I'm already scheduling in who I'm going to see because of that limited time. Apart from that, in this reality of mine that I am as this tantric urban guru, it just happens. I never have to worry about shit. Life is just doing the work for me. The people I need to meet, I'm meeting. Whereas in the default world, which is the collective consciousness of that society, i.e. London, which is scarcity, deadlines, meetings, everyone's trying to get somewhere, organisation, that impends on your reality, because that becomes the norm. Whereas the norm here is when you see someone, you go, let's see if it's in flow, kind of a spiritual bypass, no agreements, but it's also a little bit real, because if you really need to see that person, the universe will allow you to see that person.
So but do you think that that's going to be
the future?
Yeah, do you think that we're headed into a more fluid relationship to time?
If we end up in communities, yes. If we end up in conscious communities like in Ubud or Koh Phangan, where I've been spending a lot of a Diary of a Tantricorn, check out on YouTube, yes, you don't have to worry about anything. Everything just happens because everyone is open.
I do think we're heading more towards that as we reach as we're going more towards a critical mass of people who live within that state of consciousness.
Yeah.
A lot of people are waking up right now, and a lot of people are living more awarely and letting go of just planning everything. They're becoming more fluid in the way they're managing their time. And as they do that more, a lot of people come to the conclusion that everything that you're willing actually is coming towards you, as long as you actually take the time to let it. And if you're just always scheduling everything and you're living via this mentally induced way, yeah, exactly. You're creating frustration for yourself because you're trying to force the flow.
Yeah.
And you can't force the flow. You can't force a river to turn the other way, because you're not the mountain from which the river flows. You're something in the river that's going with it, and you better just swim with it.
Let's see if it's in flow.
But maybe if you had the mass of a mountain in people, that were all trying to get the river to flow upstream, you could do it.
Yeah, well, I think that, if you use it as a metaphor for manifesting a certain kind of reality, then I think that's certainly true. If we had 90% of the people in the world now believing that we're going to save the planet, then we're all going to be living sustainably and in love and in harmony with each other, then we're all going to work towards that, and everything is going to go accordingly. So it's really just about getting to that critical mass. At least that's how I see it.
Well, I believe as soon as we start shifting from a fear-based existence, which is all about scarcity, which is the majority of the world, which is all about competition, which is all about consumption, and we shift into a love-based existence, which is all about abundance and gifting, then things will change.
Yeah.
And that comes from being full in yourself, not from an external thing, not by loving someone else, but loving yourself. Once you start doing that, you become full in yourself, and then shit just falls into place.
Do you know about Peter Diamandis?
I, like a true shaman, I don't read, I learn through experience, tell me.
Okay, well, through my experience of reading people, Peter Diamandis, who is one of the Silicon Valley visionaries, and founded Singularity University, and in many respects, Silicon Valley is kind of a troubled system. It's not a perfect system, but one of the interesting things about that culture is its emphasis on taking an active stance towards the future, seeing yourself as a contributor to the future. And one of the things that he wrote recently on the Singularity weblog is about the decline in the cost of living. If you look at the amount of work that it takes for us to acquire however many calories to consume, or an education. I mean, even in the everybody is hip to the fact that like you can get a full college education online now for free if you're a self-directed learner. Because there's so much of the material that was behind a paywall at Harvard or whatever, they're now putting their entire curricula online for free, and the only thing that you're paying for is the admittedly valuable experience of being there, and like in that group of people. But like if you're disciplined, you can get your whole education, and in some respects that's actually more important to, if you were to like work with an employer and you said, oh, you went to Harvard, cool. Oh, wait a minute, you came from like Mumbai in like some ghetto and decided that you were going to give yourself a college education? Well, clearly I'm going to hire you, but that's a tangent. The point is that in some respects it's getting easier and easier to satisfy the material and also maybe the emotional and intellectual needs of the human being. And when you're starving, it's hard to share your food. When you're full, it's easy to give the rest of that meal away. And so maybe what we're witnessing in the slow kind of like historical sense is that that's a branch that just broke over here, and it's got a dream catcher in it. It's kind of an interesting thing there. Is that we're witnessing this slow transition into, and he says this very specifically, it's like into this world of post-scarcity abundance. It's going to be a whole lot easier to practice non-monogamy because we're no longer worried about like, well, there's 5 women in this village and one of them has to be my wife. And then like there's only so much land to go around to grow food on, so I need to defend this land against the guys living over the next hill.
This is why I went to Sweden. It's just a land full of abundance and everyone's polyamorous.
Yeah, the Vikings have been stealing all the pretty ladies for quite some centuries.
Where's your accent from?
I'm actually Dutch, but we learned to speak British English there, so it's something, a mingle of different accents. I think it's really interesting because when we have an abundance of possibilities these days compared to what we used to have due to our technological advances, which have also caused us to, have to spend less time working for food and all of that stuff. And I think what's really important is that people become into a state where they're able to see that they're living in abundance. When a lot of us live in a state of mental scarcity, when we're actually some of the richest people in the world, if you're in the Western world, you're far more rich than anyone could have been 1,000 years ago if you're just the average Joe in a Western country. And I think it's really important to have that realization, because once you have that, you'll see more possibilities in everything.
Gratitude is a spiritual thing. Once you start expressing gratitude and acknowledging it, you start getting more.
Exactly.
Spiritual life hack.
Although I have to say, being in Lisbon for the first time a few days ago from the United States, I got over here and I went to the grocery store and I bought a salad. I bought all the fixings for a salad. I bought a bottle of wine. I bought some bananas, and the whole thing cost me like €9. And I couldn't believe it because it would have been like twice as expensive in Austin. And so
it's really funny because actually a lot of people told me when I went here that Portugal would be very cheap, but I'm from the Netherlands, and when I went to a grocery store here, I was shocked because everything was like 30% more. Like everything costs more than in the Netherlands. Like if I buy bananas here in the Netherlands, it's gonna cost me at least like 50%, 40% less than if I do it here. And actually everything I could find cost more, like at least 40, 50 cents more than it does in the Netherlands.
And I came from LA, and when I came to Sweden, everything just tasted better. Nothing, like, it tasted real. Like, every time I go to the States, I just feel like the food there is produced on such a mass scale that you just lose the reality of the core essence of the food. Whereas when I was in Sweden,
European standards for agriculture production are quite different from the ones in the States. And they actually, you know, we
I was
don't.
really surprised how
We're not allowed here to mess with our food too much. Like, you know, there's certain boundaries to it, which has made most of the food that we have here not, like, you know, you have a lot of crops that they're trying to grow crops as fast as possible and as big as possible. That usually leads to them to have, you know, a far less taste. Like, if you have a small tomato, it's always going to taste more like a tomato than, you know, a big one. And it's the same with almost all the foods and vegetables, all the vegetables that you can get. And I think that's a big difference you have between Europe and the States as well.
Well, what I loved about Sweden was, like, I'd wake up and a mythical lover of mine would be foraging in the morning, and she'll come back with, like, all these berries and fruits and stuff just from the garden. And they live in Stockholm. It's like, it's so abundant there. In nature, everything is just, pick these. Oh, look. We're just walking in the city centre and they're just picking fruits. I
think that's really nice, because you, in different countries, especially Western countries, a lot of countries, especially in the bigger cities, you don't have much useful plant life. Like, they'll try to have some trees and all that stuff, but none of them are fruit-bearing trees. They don't have bushes that have berries and that kind of stuff. And I'm from the Netherlands, where most cities are pretty green, and in parks and all that stuff, and some of them you can pick the berries all summer long, you know. And it's really nice to see that, especially in countries, especially in Scandinavia and wherever they can do that, they try to do that more, because it's creating abundance.
It is.
And a lot of other countries, they won't do that, because that way you're not going to pay the supermarket anymore. And you know, so money is destroying the whole thing of creating abundance everywhere. Because, I mean, let's face it, if you build cities from now on to incorporate more plant life, useful plant life, you know, plants that filter out certain toxics that come from exhaust fumes and all of that kind of stuff, and fruit-bearing trees and bushes and all of these things, we wouldn't need to import that much into a city. We live more sustainably by default.
This is true.
And and no one would have to be hungry, because even if you wouldn't have a home, you could just go and pick fruits.
I was at the Tantra festival last week, and me and an American friend, we were chatting away, and out the corner of our eye, we both witnesses this fairy-like lady was just plucking fruit from the trees and eating it, and we both went, this country is so abundant. How can you could just eat stuff off the tree? And the irony is, we're meant to do that.
Yeah, that's what we've been doing for quite a while,
but we just are so conditioned into fucking buying the stuff.
It's because we've decentralized and specialized a lot in our societies, you know. Like, we only grow food in certain places. We do this in a certain place and this in another, rather than centralizing it all geographically.
Oh, but then again, if we're all about oneness, surely globalization is oneness.
In a sense, it is. I think it is. I mean,
but it went too bad.
It's
with all
like
good things, with good intentions.
Okay, so this is interesting. This is a trend, right? That I've been like on the fence about, right? Because clearly we want to, you know, there's like, the Cold War didn't happen. You know, this war that everybody's talking about. I mean, it never became a hot war. You know, like there's this because there's actually this deeper interdependency between these countries that are pretending to be at war. You know, like the United States and Japan, or like the United States and China. You know, it's like we're buying so much from them. They're relying on us so much for, you know. And if you Parag Khanna just put a book called Connectography, where he says basically, like, the future is not about the lines dividing countries, it's about the infrastructure connecting countries. And that the real lines of cultural relevance and economic influence are like the railroads and the invisible economic things. But we're still living in a world where we don't have instant real-time translation. You know, we're speaking different languages. You know, I feel like a schmuck coming over here and not knowing fluent Portuguese, you know.
Google Translate is going to be just like Star Trek.
I mean, I've got Google Translate, but you know, it's helping. It's helping. I mean, it's at least showing that I'm trying. You know.
I'm English. I demand everyone speak my language. God damn it.
We probably will soon. Most of us do.
I know.
Well, everyone will speak HTML.
Yeah,
you
one
know.
day, for sure.
Yeah.
And that'll just be.
But we all speak with emoticons, you know.
Well, everybody knows that the multi-touch, like the pinch, and the, you know, that's zooming in, zooming out, right?
Yeah.
But you know, in the U.S., there's this big thing right now, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement,
TT.
the TPP. To place this recording historically, there's this issue where President Obama has been backing this agreement that relinquishes a lot of the United States' economic sovereignty to this unelected, mysterious tribunal
It's
of.
just like the Phantom Menace.
It is. It's there's this like international mercantile situation that is going to be more powerful than the United States court system, and will start determining policy in the participating nations. So it's like the multinational corporations are actually taking, this is a clear seize of power from the national level and national concerns to like what we are hoping will be this thing. Some people are like, well, no, we need business. We need the energy to flow. We need to be circulating this stuff. But all of these participating nations, not all of them, but some of them, the United States is definitely afraid of the fact that, you know, we've lost so much of our economy to people that are willing to do it cheaper somewhere else. And so when we plunge into a planetary system like that, then like how do you make sure everybody gets a fair shake? How do you make sure that everyone is represented in the decisions? And like the way that we're trying to go about it right now is fucked.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because TTIP is this agreement that, to me, it sort of represents that the people who are, you know, the companies that obviously already have most of the power in the world. I mean, corporations are more powerful than countries when in terms of determining what is going to happen, because money, you know, money makes people do what they do in this world, and therefore, who has more money will, you know, eventually have more power. And that's actually what's happened in the last like 20 years or so, is that corporations have actually become more wealthy than the countries combined. Like it's not 50-50 anymore, it's 51-49 for the corporations. And I think it's really interesting that it's already happening. There's so much lobbying in politics that most of the decisions that happen in terms of trade laws and all that kind of stuff, agreements about even about the environment and how the industry has to deal with it, they're greatly influenced by lobbying corporations that are trying to you know, do these things for their own good. And it seems that like TTIP would be like accepting accepting that agreement would be like just accepting that that's the way it already is, and finally making that legal.
See, for me, this is beyond me. I don't really deal with these things in my life because, well, it bores me. So I have my own theory, and the reason why I want to be famous is because I want everyone to go through the things that I go through. I'm free. Like, I don't have to worry about these TT bollocks stuff. I live by the 3 steps of freedom within a capitalist society. Would you like to know what they are?
Yeah, sure.
You're already living it. I don't know what your situations are. I'm also living it. Number 1, the hardest thing to do to get out of a capitalist society is choose a job that you love, so you never have to work another day in your life. So you make your love into work. So you get paid for a hobby. It's not work. You're going into work as joy. You're getting paid and waking up because of joy. That's stage 1. That's the hardest thing you'll do. Everyone on this planet is doing a shitty job because they have to do it due to the scarcity thing. I don't. I was an art director in advertising. I can't read or write, so I just made pretty pictures to the biggest brands on the planet. if you do something that you love doing, you will naturally get paid handsomely for it. Fact. Number 2, with all that hobby and joy money that you created, you'll naturally start saving money, and with that money you invest it into a property, you buy it, so you no longer have to, and you put your friends in it as well, so you have affordable housing for your friends. So you're living in a little community that everyone's paying your rent, your mortgage, so you could actually be more freer to do the more things that you want, so you're more full in yourself, so you could actually start serving humanity. And once you start being in that state of mind, things start to flow. I'm in stage 2, but I'm a bit fucked financially at the moment. But I'm working on some spiritual life hacks at the moment. And stage 3, which is happening already for me, buying land, so you're completely self-sustainable, starting to live off the land, create an earthship and build a community, so it starts becoming self-sustainable, so you literally don't have to pay for anything. You get out of the system completely and you go full hippie.
You just successfully described the plans I'm executing right now in my life.
Every divine
that's the exact thing I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
Like I'm working towards it.
That's
like,
exactly what
I'm currently working on making my hobby into my work, doing the thing I love most, more and more, and getting paid more and more for it. So eventually I can live off it.
Yeah.
And yeah, my end goal is also to buy a property somewhere, to get the most loving and nice and generous people and thankful people that I know together to live on the land sustainably.
Yeah.
That's been my goal for years, and I'm finally actually taking the steps to realize that, to live more wellly
and more people do that. We don't need the fucking system.
We don't.
We can start living off the land, and as long as we have this, I believe there's a formula to everything, and there is going to be a formula to creating these self-sustainable communities. I don't know what they are yet, but I'm sure it's already existing out
But we were just saying,
hold on, lots of people working on it. There are many communities
and then
like
we
this
start
popping up everywhere.
bringing this community together, so we all get out of the system, and then we all start creating something where we don't need money. It's just co-creational. But other people, middle class hippies, usually end up paying for loads of stuff, and they just pay for the stuff anyway.
Well, now, wait a minute though, because we all just agreed that it's the system that has empowered us to, the people that are not getting totally shit on by that system are able to do step 1. Yeah. It's like that we've made it so that we've satisfied our basic needs enough that we can be, because 100 years ago, do you think that you would have been able to go around as sacredsexualawakening.com and that would have been a thing? Probably not.
No.
You would have been in a factory.
Tantric practitioners.
I think it's really.
There always was that world.
I think one of the things that leads to this is the realization that you're living in abundance will allow you to create more for yourself and for others, and I think that's really the key to this whole thing, is to be, because right now, I mean, I'm not very rich. I don't make that much, but I make enough to live by, and next to just living, I spend most of my time, almost all of my free time, doing what I love, and that creates so much emotional and mental abundance for me that I'm a lot of a healthier person. I'm a lot more happy, which allows me to go on a road where I'm actually living in relative poverty relative to how rich most people are in my country, but I feel far more rich, and it's allowing me to go into this richer future by being thankful for the riches I already have. And I think that's really important, because when you get into this mind state where you're thankful for everything you're given, you'll be given more. Because you're not, if you give something to someone, you give someone a gift, and they're very ungrateful for it, you're gonna give them another gift. I don't think so, because they're being ungrateful.
Yeah.
When someone's very grateful, you will never mind giving that person something. And that I think that's a universal principle. I think the universe is gonna like you more when you show more love to it. Regardless of what part of the universe you're showing love to.
Yes, I like that.
Be it a woman, be it a plant, be it whatever. You show love, you get it. It's really that
Gratitude,
simple.
yeah.
Do you guys have anything to say about, this is a thing that I want to be true for everyone in 100 years, and yet it seems like that all of us are in some way or another so reliant on the system that we're trying to escape. Maybe for me it's like, let's get back to the issue of Tantra, right? And Tantra, when we were talking in the like invisible zero episode of this conversation,
the best part never got interviewed.
The best part was talking about this notion of embracing the shadow, embracing the darkness, and recognizing it as a projection of the disowned self, right? So I find it kind of strange that it's like, what does capitalism actually produce? What is capitalism's main product? It seems like people who are trying to escape capitalism is the main product. And like, in what sense have we been programmed by this system that we all rely on to try and transform it from the inside, but in so doing are actually feeding it? You know, and actually, is that a bad thing?
And what I said about the 3 stages of freedom in a capitalist society, if you truly think about it, I'm telling you to become a capitalist.
Yeah, of course.
Exactly. It was kind of a funny...
You're just telling me to be a smarter capitalist.
Exactly, just play the system.
You're using capitalism for your advantage to create abundance outside of it. I mean, of course, you know, you can't escape it just, you know, tomorrow. You have to work towards it. Yeah,
it's learning to, like, give me a system that works outside of capitalism. The Ubuntu thing in Africa is something that works.
Yeah, take a seat.
Yeah, sure.
There's 5 of us now sitting here. What's your names, guys?
I'm Steve.
Steve. Angie? It's a pleasure. Yeah.
I'm Shaz.
So we can move the mic.
As well, like with how like capitalism works to a point where it like has advanced us so far, but
yeah, show me a system that works better, and then we'll join it. Like
that's the thing. I think we're still working on that.
Well, you know, that's what I'm working on.
There are theories on how to do that. Like, for example, a resource-based economy is what most of the people, and you know, who think about these sort of things are going more towards to have this sort of inventory of all the things that we have on Earth, all our resources, and to use them in a way that we're producing what we need in abundance, so that there will be enough for everyone. But to do it in such a smart way that we won't pollute as much, we won't produce as much waste, and we'll actually be able to sustain it for far longer, because we're using our resources in a smart way, in a way that we're not throwing away half of the things we produce.
But actually, this system is kind of working right now, because there is a system of permaculture. I don't know if you're aware, and this is the way of living the sustainable life, and it's already have a strong fundaments and the straight rules how to follow and how to live in a sustainable life in order to get more from the nature. Because if you live side by side with the nature, not killing it and force towards it, you can get more out of it, and not getting the toxic waste on it.
Tamera in Portugal, a self-sustainable free love community, is one of them. There's so many of these communities all around the world.
Yeah.
And my next mission in the next 2 years is to go to all of these ones, take what they've got, and build my own.
Nice.
I worked in advertising.
I was gonna say, isn't that kind of a like a British colonial attitude?
Wow.
Resource extraction, you've learned well.
I really have. 15 years in advertising.
But you know, I mean, getting back to this thing about like the first, if we're looking at this in terms of we're the blue-green algae that have just learned to photosynthesize, and we're polluting everything. But we're creating. Every generation's trash becomes something valuable to the next generation. All of this shit that my parents had that they don't really care about anymore, clearly never did, but it's like a relic of them somehow. And I wonder, maybe the end game of capitalism is not what we think it is. It's like a caterpillar that gets fatter and fatter and fatter, and you're like, well, this can't go on forever. And it doesn't, because what it has done is it's accumulated reserves that it needs in order to like fuel this transformation. And like maybe we're you know, it's like we're at that point historically where we have generated so much trash that we've hit the bottom, and we've kicked in the negative feedback mechanism where we have to start thinking about like these gorgeous jellyfish and structures that they've built. There's a massive sculpture of Earth over here that's made out of like broken car parts.
I know, I love it.
And like there's jellyfish that we saw made out of
cups. Plastic
cups and plastic cups, and people that are building homes out of they're stuffing plastic bottles and using them as building bricks. And
with every subculture, it gets exploited by advertising and turns into popular culture, and then it disappears, and then something else takes its place. I believe this to be like Facebook is going through its negative feedback moment now where it's isolating people, but I believe it's going to evolve into something greater. Capitalism is going through the same thing where it started off as a good thing, like all good things do, trying to help everyone, and it hits critical mass, and then something fucked up happens, and we have to find another way. And I believe, as Jeff Goldblum always said in Jurassic Park, nature always finds a way. We will always find a way.
Yeah, I mean, we do. I think
we're not gonna. I don't think it's gonna be a dystopian society.
I mean, one of the interesting parts of our evolution is also that we always transition through different modes of society. You know, like now we're living in a capitalist society. Before that, you know, we had feudalistic societies. We had all these different ways of.
And remember, it's always been better.
Yeah, we're always improving it.
Yeah.
And capitalism is also just another way of, you know, it's created a lot of room for innovation and all kinds of good stuff. But you know, most of the good stuff we got out of capitalism is already, you know, a few decades in the past, and we're since then, you know, I mean, the hippies were trying to make the shift that we're trying to make now. I think most of us, because they already saw that, you know, we were heading towards this end game of capitalism where we see that we have to transition into a new system, you know, with the tools that capitalism has given us by, you know, the way we now divide our resources, the way everything is available to everyone in a certain amount, and it's created a lot of possibilities. That's what capitalism has done, but it's also created a lot of scarcity because of you know, the fact that, you know, if you have to worry more about making a profit off of a product, then you're always going to make a shittier product for more money that's going to, you know, have a faster expiration date, because then people will buy more. But you know, capitalism in this way is forcing us to not build the best of everything, you know, that lasts the longest. It's making us actually do quite the opposite. And that's how it's destroying much of the planet. And I think the only way we can shift from that is by really going into thinking about, okay, how are we going to use the resources, technology and knowledge that we have now to actually create this, you know, possible future utopia that we're all hoping to get to one day. You know, I'm trying to work towards that as well by thinking about how can we build the bridge from this system to the next, because there are so many people also who have in great detail tried to come up with new systems, come up with new ways of managing a resource and living together in ways that are completely sustainable, and it can be done. Those people have done it in such great detail that they've proven that theoretically it can be done. Now the only question is, how are we going to build the bridge from that system to,
that's where you need the money.
Exactly.
Well,
that's why you need the money, because that money is resources, and with those resources you can, you know, invest that into more sustainable options of living.
Therefore, we're right now in like a middle step of the process where some things are getting really quite fucked up, but the other are really well. So the thing is that we are in the good way of border, because we are all from the well-being countries like United States and so on. But this will influence the rest, the other part. Therefore, for example, in the means of the fair trade, we can get it better for the other half. Right now, we are living this well-being life because we are in this border, you know, in this.
See, I had a vision, again, another one through meditation, where it's going to be our generation that frees us from this way of living, but it's going to be our children that actually free us from everything. Because we would have done all the self-work we need to do to ourselves to raise the children that will help us free us from this society. That's what I saw.
Steve, you brought up the universal living wage.
I don't know exactly how I feel about it, or how
you're talking about like the basic income.
And like how that would change society as it is. Like, would we be less capitalistic because of that? Would we change our way of thinking about that as well? Because you didn't have to go out and find a job. People would just be doing what is best for the society, for themselves.
Well, everyone's on the same wage.
Yeah, well,
No, they're actually doing more experiments with this in a lot of Western countries right now, where they're allowing more and more people to test that. Like they get the basic income for a year, which basically means that you get everything you need to live for free. So your rent, your food, and all that stuff. You get enough money for that. So next to that, you no longer have scarcity, basically, because you get everything you need to live, and then you can choose what you want to do with your time. And what we're seeing in a lot of those experiments is that people are starting to actually, they quit their current job and they're going to start doing the thing they loved in the first place. And a lot of these people, after a year, they're far happier, they're far healthier, they're doing something they love, and they're actually working more than they did before because they love their job.
Exactly.
And they're doing a far better job at their job than someone else who only did it for the money.
Yeah.
And it's really nice because actually in more and more countries they actually want to experiment with it more. They're doing it bigger in the Netherlands as well. There have been some experiments with small groups, and they're doing a much bigger group now in 2017. And actually I've heard that Finland is planning on actually doing this and starting to give people a basic income starting in, I think, 2017, actually next year. Right. Which I think is going to, I think Finland is going to show the world how it's done. Because
it's the Scandies, they're in abundance.
I know. I mean, universities are free.
Exactly, it's unbelievable.
We have so much here. We can give everyone what they need, and they'll create more abundance. They actually got it,
So to me, that's the mind fuck of this. Is that I read a speech by Lynn Rothschild.
Oh, shit.
Of all people, and she was advocating for universal basic income because she was saying, if we consolidate, if we gather all the wealth amongst a few people, who's going to be left to buy all the things? She's like, what capitalism needs at this point is consumers. It relies on consumers, and if everyone is struggling for subsistence, who's going to be left to buy things? We've destroyed the middle class. Capitalism requires a middle class in order to exist. Otherwise, it reverts back to feudalism. And it just becomes the princes and paupers. It's like we need that educated middle, to keep things in circulation, to keep it moving. So it's a weird Deus ex machina, like last minute reversal that seems to be going on now, where it's like
they're starting to realize that the system that they created can't go on if they keep all the money in one place. Obviously capitalism needs the money to flow, and if everyone actually has enough money to buy things, they'll always keep buying things. You can't buy things with money you don't have. Therefore, the more poor people you get, the less capitalism actually works. And if we actually get this basic income, then I do think that capitalism can work do far better things from us. And I think it's like the first step in an actual transition towards a point where we won't need money anymore, because we're going to find different ways of doing all our logistics, of making sure that everyone everywhere gets what they need, not just because one corporation is paying the other to transport bananas from South America to Europe. Is going to be because we need this and this food there, and so give it over here if you have enough for everyone. And as long as we're creating that abundance, we can actually have everything everywhere without needing money to get it there. Simply because if we actually apply, how do you call it, demand and what's the thing?
Supply and demand.
Yeah. Then without money, you'll actually always get what you need.
A few friends of mine, they're starting a self-sustainable island just off of Thailand, I believe, where there is no money. It's all about having this island, and it's gonna be like Burning Man, pretty much.
Nice.
I saw that movie, The Beach.
Oh, you did? Tell me more.
They run afoul of some ganja farmers, and Leonardo DiCaprio fights a shark.
He does. He gets someone's leg bitten off, and
yeah, true. That was what it was about. Yeah.
Everyone was trying to get out of this thing. And of course, this notion that if you try to escape, you're actually giving power to the thing that you're rejecting.
See, the community I'm going to build is going to be for the rich, powerful people that are actively trying to change the world in some way. But we won't have to worry about money because you don't need any money. But we'll all be rich in ourselves, so we could all creating something that will help everyone else.
You know, I hear you if you really want to do that, you should build it on a spring.
Like the Fly Ranch.
Well, yeah, actually, because
My mates were involved in
that's
getting
the
that.
Fly Ranch that Burning Man just bought. That's the Way of Merlin is like this book about the path of the wizard Merlin, and like historically, he's a male wizard operating within a feminine tradition, and what they say is that like all power as a wizard is drawn from the land. In like any defense of capitalism, we have to remember that it's all based on extraction. And actually, just a few podcasts ago, we interviewed this guy, Ashley Dawson, who wrote a book about extinction that was a scathing critique of capitalism, saying we can't solve the extinctions that we're creating with capitalism. It was kind of, it's a short one, worth a read if you're curious. But like going back pre-capitalism, it's still the case that magical power is drawn from the land. And like if you look at the origin of the word wealth comes from the same word as well. And it's about alignment with, again, a resource-based economy. It's about finding a place where, like, if you want to set up there, you need
water.
Water.
That's why Tamara works.
Yeah, you need these
about
basic things.
Yeah. It's really funny how the word wealth is like fusing the words well and health together. You need a healthy wealth, otherwise you're not going to be wealthy for very long.
Right.
Very true.
Have you been to Tamara?
It's on my things to do list. There's the Zeg community in Germany, Tamara. There's loads of permaculture communities in Hawaii. There's a whole tour that I will go on eventually.
So we're like ramming on 2 hours here.
Whoa.
Yeah. So I guess the way that we usually end these is by talking about what we genuinely imagine the future could be like or will be like. And then also, given that this is bound to be listened to by millions of people thousands of years from now, archaeologists of the distant future, like,
or aliens,
whoever they are, I didn't say they were human, then what is the, do you have a message to that future?
I'll be the third person to answer.
Okay. There's 6 of us now here.
At the moment, for me, I'm quite.
Steve, here you go.
I'm quite pessimistic about the future. Like, I don't like the way that's heading, and I feel like I need to do more to actually, rather than just not liking where it's going, actually get involved and do something more. So yeah, I see there's a lot of hope. I'm more on the skeptic side for the future and a bit worried
Well, I think that actually what I would like to say is some of the things you've already said before were about these 3 rules that you have, and I think that's very important that people learn about that. That is important to learn that you should focus on finding something that you want to do passionately, something that you love doing, and to not stop until you've found that thing and then focus on doing that and creating abundance for everything. Because the way I have these 2 possible futures, and one is where we don't wake up fast enough when we destroy everything before we can do something about it, or we blow ourselves up. These possibilities are there, but I like to believe that the more I work towards the other future, the future where we build the bridge towards the utopia that we could possibly have with all the knowledge that we have now, is that the more I do it, the more other people will do that. Like, if you spread it, it's like circles touching circles. If I speak to 5 people about this and they're convinced to do something about it as well, and they'll speak to another 5 people, and you go on and on and on, you got thousands, millions of people eventually, if these circles keep touching. It's about everyone's inner circle touching another outer circle, and that touching another inner circle, touching another outer circle. And I think that's what's happening. That's what I see happening at these festivals. That's why they become bigger, and there's more and more of them every year. And I think that the main thing is that just like if you I know like it can be hard at sometimes because you can feel alone when you're starting this journey. And the most important thing is to find at least one companion on that journey, to find some people to talk to about these things, so you can actually stay in that mindset, so you can keep participating in creating a better future rather than passively, accepting the shit that you're given. And I think that's the main thing I want to see, is participate in life and don't hold back. Learn about what you want to give, who you are, and what you want to give to the world, and do it.
Beautiful. I believe in Star Trek. We're going to live a utopian society. I know that because of Star Trek we have mobile phones and and Skype. So I honestly believe that we will live in a beautiful future where our kids will run free. And I mean, I'm living in an amazing future right now. I'm in abundance. I'm in these conscious communities living the dream. I've been to Sweden. I keep on going back to Sweden because I can't believe a place like that fucking exists and no one's gotten onto it. It's so much abundance. It already exists. We are just fed stories from the media saying things are fucked. In Sweden, the stories that they have is like a royal family had an argument at a dinner party. Like, things aren't that fucked in that country. So for me, there's an awakening happening across the planet. I know this because I've gone through it, and I'm going through it, and I will be going through it until I die. And I'm 36 now. Like, I lived the normal life until I was 34. I didn't know there was this other thing, this new consciousness. I know there is now, and now I'm healing myself to the point that I don't think how I used to, and I don't think like the rest of society anymore. And I'm meeting more and more like-minded people who want to co-create, more and more people who want to build and share and love and live in joy and abundance. And it's happening. I have no fear of the future. I embrace it and I love it.
Hopefully with hopefully with our good choices in our daily life basis, we will create this kind of a ecological atomic bomb, which will happen with a big boom of a good spirit and souls. Because while more and more people are getting into it, it will spread out and the particle will get bigger and better. So that's, I think, how it will happen, hopefully.
Well, that's a good place to wrap it.
What about you?
Official.
I want to hear about your one.
I'm giving a whole talk about this in a few days, about what I think the future is going to be like. But the short of it is that I spend most of my time thinking about the psychological future. Like, we spend so much time thinking about what it's going to look like, like what kind of cars we're going to be driving in and what kind of electrical toys we're going to be playing with, whether our food is going to be like the food that we're eating now. And I'm more interested in, like, what is it going to take for us to be the kind of people that live in that future? Get a little biblical on you. Moses leads the Jews through 40 years in the wilderness. They finally get to the promised land, but he can't go because it's like you were saying about, we've got to do the work on ourselves, but it's the kids that get to live in this world. And it's like, what is the change that each of us needs to go through in order to make the world that we want to live in believable? And it seems like the primary thing is that right now, connectedness through telecommunications is causing us to live in this like echo chamber of paranoia. And it's not just quote unquote the media. It's the fact that, like, if all of your friends are sad, you're sad. And we're moving out of this isolated modern world back into this more sort of tribal identity where each of us is more identified with the group, and we're less individualistic, but that comes at a cost. And the cost is that we're more permeable to the emotional experiences of other people. So I think that in order for that not to collapse into tribalism, for it not to collapse into Donald Trump versus Nazis, fighting in robot suits or some crazy bullshit like that, then we need to be able to transcend our emotional reactivity. We need to actually be able to take the contents of our experience as objects and see them as arising within our awareness, and that really, like, in order to thrive on this planet through all of this insane change, we can't make sense of everything that's going on. We can't even try. There's a place for meditation, there's a place for intellectual activity, and yet it's getting more and more important that people learn to be able to think critically about the information that they're getting and not just assume that what they hear is true, even from your own friends, even from your own mind. I think that really, like, a spiritual skepticism and a sense of Zen doubt in everything that we know, including the existence of a separate self, including this notion that I am a thing. Take it all the way. And the more that we subject our lives to that kind of scrutiny, the freer we are from the animalistic, reactive nightmare of just, like, cause and effect and, like, responding to news. And it's amazing that we haven't blown ourselves up in nuclear war, because when you're on a submarine with all of those other guys and they're all, like, sleep deprived and afraid, and you got your finger on the button, it's amazing that some rogue submarine captain did not launch a warhead and just blow everything up already.
Get a false signal that they'd already been fired on, and to fire the first and to fire back, but he chose not to because he was skeptical, and that's why the Cold War didn't turn into more than that. Yeah,
it was not believing that there's actually somebody out there. Not just, if I were like, somebody's out to get you, and you're like, oh really? Well, go on. So basically, I just think that, and there's the sunset.
Oh, beautiful one.
Yeah, I just think that what it's going to take is a loosening of our ego boundaries in a responsible way that maintains our ability to think critically, but also embeds the intelligence of our heads and our critical faculties in this larger intelligence of the body and intuitive understanding. And that the only way to move forward into this world is as complete people, and not as fractured people.
Self-love, merging of Shiva and Shakti.
You gotta be the whole thing.
Yes.
Or
balanced.
Basically, everyone do Tantra.
Yeah.
It's true.
So that's a fine place. Thanks, guys.
We've got a lot more to learn. The work is not done here, and we may not ever figure it out. We probably won't figure it out.